Thank you so much for joining us today. It looks like we have a good group of people already online, and we are here today for our second in the Pandell Leadership Series. So, my name is Eliza. I am a customer engagement specialist here at Pandell. I would like to invite Dean, who's our senior account executive here at Pandell, to say hello to you and give a quick introduction.
Thanks, Eliza. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to introduce John Zahary today. John holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the U of C, as well as a Master's of Philosophy and Management Studies from the University of Oxford. John's worked in many capacities of oil and gas, including upstream, midstream, and downstream. And John has experience in various areas, technical engineering, of course, operations roles, as well as financial roles. John has worked as an executive, C-level, board of directors in many, many oil and gas companies over a distinguished 37-year career. Some of the companies he's worked with includes Imperial, Pancan, Petrovera, Osum, Sunshine Oil Sands, and I worked with John over quite a few years at Harvest Operations. When John left Harvest in 2012, I will say it was a blow to the staff and to Harvest. However, he had finalized the future survival of Harvest very, very well, and he moved on to greener pastures. Today, John is president and CEO of Altex Energy. They are a private rail terminal company, which is an industry leader in providing services to load crude oil on rail cars for movement, not only in Canada, but North America and globally. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. John Zahary.
Dean, thank you very much. And Eliza, thank you to you as well. And thanks to Pandell. Good afternoon to everyone listening in, and appreciate your interest in this story. I've titled it, The Benefit of Moving Crude Oil by Railway. Well, we're on this cover page, and just to give a sense of what an Altex rail terminal looks like, or what a crude oil rail terminal looks like. The one on the left is our Unity, Saskatchewan terminal. The one on the right is our Lashburn, Saskatchewan terminal. And you can get a sense there just what's involved, but you can see the tankage that stores the oil that comes in by truck, stores the oil in the tankage on the right-hand side of the Lashburn picture. And they're a bit sort of further along in that picture, but the trucks come in, there's a gas pump type setup that allows the trucks to unload at a gas pump that takes the oils out of the truck and puts it in the tank. And then right in the sort of center of the picture is the loading rack that loads the oil into the rail cars. And obviously you can see the rail cars there positioned, either empties that have returned to be filled up, or full ones that are waiting to be moved to market. So I'll step you through exactly how that works and why that makes some sense. But before I get started, maybe just give you a sense of who Altex is. Altex is a rail terminal company. So we build, own, operate the rail terminals that are located along the railway. Our terminals are all located in heavy oil sands producing areas. We load most of the heavy oil and oil sands that gets on rail cars in Canada goes through an Altex terminal. And certainly most of the undiluted heavy oil and oil sands oil that gets on a rail car in Canada goes through an Altex terminal. We unload other products, taking advantage of the lower cost transportation associated with using the rail system, and we move a goodly amount of the oil that moves out of the system. It was Altex that, in partnership with Canadian National Railway, that started the business about a decade ago, and still is a dominant player in the business. And we have a variety of different technologies, patents and technology that allow us to provide services to customers that improve their supply cost. The terminals are located, as you can see on this slide, they're all in heavy oil sands producing areas. So we've got two Our largest is at Lashburn, as you can see. That's just east of Lloydminster, in the middle of the kind of Lloyd heavy oil producing region. From that terminal, we've moved oil from the Cold Lake oil sands region, the Athabasca oil sands region as well. That's the kind of largest and the flagship of the Altex terminals. But we've got kind of what I'll call medium-sized terminals. They'd be probably the fifth and sixth largest terminal in Canada, but for moving crude oil, but they're what I'll call medium-sized terminals. And then we've got a small terminal up in the Peace River oil sands area as well. So, but to step back and just give you a sense of kind of where the business came from, you know, what was the problem that Altex was set up about 15 years ago by Azimuth Private Equity. It was set up really not. It was set up really to deal with you know, one of the most significant problems that erodes value for Western Canadian oil producers, which is most of the oil produced in Western Canada is heavy oil or bitumen. It's heavy, it's thick, and in order to make that go down a pipeline, you have to dilute it with condensate, light hydrocarbon, typically condensate. The problem is that that light oil, that condensate, is worth far more in Western Canada than it is at the refinery sites. So it's worth far more as a diluent than it is as a refinery feedstock. And so we in Western Canada import 300,000 or 400,000 barrels a day of condensate. And so we move it to Western Canada so we can cut the heavy oil that we produce in Western Canada with it, and then we move it back to where the condensate just came from. If it sounds like there's two extra moves in there to get back to the same place you were when you started, there are two extra moves in there, which will cost about $20 a barrel to move the condensate into Western Canada so it can be moved back to where it came from. The implication is that this is a significant issue. So it was really that problem that resulted, that was identified by Altex early on in the process and by Azimuth, and they set out to solve that problem by finding a more efficient way to move Western Canadian production to market without having to incur this loss associated with bringing condensate to Western Canada so that we can ship it back to where it came from. So that was really the original identified problem and the identified objective for Altex when it got set up. Now, over those 15 years, and particularly over the last 10 years, we've also had the other problem that there just isn't enough. It's been very challenging to build enough pipelines to keep up with the growing production in Western Canada. So just having additional egress or additional opportunity, I guess, with the pipeline system to move the oil out of Western Canada to markets has been a significant issue, which has led to, you know, the bitumen bubble, the great contraction of price that we saw in the fourth quarter of 2018, and it affects us even today because the pipeline system hasn't been effectively expanded through stories that I think everyone has heard, hasn't been effectively expanded so that it can remove the product from Western Canada. Thus, you have a lot of product on product competition, which has led to lower prices in Western Canada. So we suffer from very low prices in Western Canada. It's been a great problem that has gone on for a number of years. Certainly, the additional egress associated with using the rail system has been very effective at clearing that backlog of production and getting it to market. So, what is the advantage of rail? And there are a number. Certainly, the fact the rail already exists is a huge advantage. Canada has enough capacity. There's enough rail cars moving every day to remove about 15 million barrels a day of oil out of Western Canada. Obviously, it doesn't do that, and for a number of reasons. Number one, we don't produce 15 million barrels a day of oil in Western Canada, but and it would only do 15 million barrels a day of Western Canada if every rail car was full of oil. Now, obviously, it isn't, because the rail system is always also moving, cars and Christmas lights and agricultural products, and it has a huge capacity on the rail system to move product around the country, and it moves vast amount of product around the country. But certainly, oil is oil, or frac sand, or other products that are needed or used in the oil business, is certainly a great opportunity to use existing rail system in order to move that to markets. It also, of course, gets beyond the current oversupplied market. So most of the infrastructure that was built into Western Canada to get Western Canadian production to markets all heads to Southern Ontario or to the US Midwest. That's been a great market for Canada over many, many years, and will continue to be a great market for Canadian production. The problem is, as US production has increased and demand has not increased in most parts of North America, is we're jamming more and more Western Canadian oil into oversupplied markets. The advantage of rail, as I'll show in a moment, is it moves to a variety of other places as well, which are much more robust markets and are willing to pay much higher prices for oil. And that is an opportunity to use the rail system to get to those markets. And finally, and importantly, the rail system has been around for a long time. It's safe. It moves lots of products, lots of different products. It's safe. It's reliable, and most significantly, as I've sort of focused on and will continue to focus on, it's very efficient. It's about 1/10 the price of trucking on a per mile basis. So it's if you want to maximize the price as a producer, you want to get it out of trucks as soon as possible, and you want to get it in rail, and you want to get it to the best markets that you can get it to. So to step back, and I appreciate for many people, myself included, until I started spending more time on this, I didn't actually know as much about the rail system as I probably should have. I've seen earlier in my career, I did have the opportunity to work for Pan Canadian, who had a sister company, Canadian Pacific Railway. So I did that, and so I had some background with the rail system as well, and I've seen them going by on the road more than once. But the rail system is very extensive. So this map shows the rail system that goes across North America. The Canadian National Railway is the one shown in red. Canadian Pacific is the one shown in brown. And you can see, and then the five U.S. railways, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, Union Pacific, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Kansas City are the five U.S. rail systems. If you look at the map, what should be crystal clear is the railway goes everywhere, including through Western Canada. And so you can load things on rail cars in Western Canada, and you can get them to, whatever markets are paying the highest price. So you're not confined to the pipe system. Pipe system moves a lot more oil than the rail system does, but the pipe system tends to flow where the pipeline is and nowhere else. The rail system provides flexibility to producers, and it also provides flexibility to the refineries, who can access those barrels in Western Canada, which in many cases are cheaper than barrels they can find anywhere else in the world. And so utilizing the rail system, buyers can get at the cheap barrels, and the producers of those cheap barrels can get at markets that pay them higher prices. In many cases, that's around North America. But as I'll show in a minute as well, the dynamics of the international oil and gas demand, it means that the demand in North America and Western Europe has been pretty flat for a number of years, but demand around the world continues to increase at a very significant level, and that increase is largely driven by demand in East Asia. So East Asia is looking for significant production. This this slide is trying to convey what I had talked about before, that we sell Western Canadian Select, or the type of heavy oil that we produce in Western Canada, typically at a $10 to $20 discount from West Texas Intermediate, a light crude. It's also, both of those are landlocked crudes. Western Canada Select, obviously in Western Canada at Hardisty, West Texas Intermediate in Cushing, Oklahoma. They're both inland North American destinations. The highest price is on the coast, because all coastal buyers of oil, including coastal refineries anywhere in North America, tend to pay the Brent price for oil, and Brent has been running $2 to $5 a barrel more than WTI has for a number of years, after historically have run at a discount. And that's only reflective of supply-demand fundamentals and infrastructure fundamentals, that it has become, as inland North American production has grown and demand has not grown, that oil has to get to displace imported crudes on the coast, and so you need infrastructure to do that. You need infrastructure that gets you to the coast to do that. And if you have that infrastructure, you can move to higher price markets. So all of these factors, with the addition of the price of diluent in Western Canada that erodes quite enormously what a Western Canadian producer gets paid, all of those factors are important in driving demand towards this diluent-free method of accessing better markets. This is a busy slide, and I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but this slide, the underlying map here, is the pipeline grid. So shown in red there are the main Enbridge conduit to move oil out of Western Canada, and as well you can see on there the TransCanada and the Trans Mountain pipelines that also move oil out of Western Canada. So the system is set up. It's set up to feed that oil out of Western Canada to those robust markets in the U.S. Midwest and Southern Ontario. The problem is those markets aren't growing and are also serviced by growing production in those regions. So we're the furthest away production in Western Canada. We're trying to get into markets which are oversupplied. Can we not find better markets? That's the first point. The real point of this slide is to talk about the problem that we take condensate that's worth $50 in the refinery area. We move it to Canada, so it costs about $10 to get it to Canada. So now it's worth $60. We mix heavy oil, a third to a half of the blend is going to be the condensate, and we send it back to where it's worth $50. So it's a very creative way of turning $50 into $30, or $40 into $20. But can we not find a way to do it better? And the way to do it better is to find a way to move oil without putting the diluent in. And that was and is, a major driver behind what Altex has done now for a decade, in conjunction with Canadian National Railway. But we take oil from producers, put it in rail cars, send it to people. We don't need the condensate. The producers don't need to buy the condensate. It's a very efficient way of moving the oil to people that want to buy it. And because it's a very efficient way of moving the oil to people that want to buy it, they can afford to pay you more for the oil, which, as we all know today, in today's economic situations, if you can get $1 or $2 more for a barrel of oil today, it's very significant in the economics. So that's the diluent driver. This is really the egress driver. I won't belabor this. Obviously, anybody who's worked in the business as we all have seen the great challenges getting pipelines built, getting them up and running, keeping them up and running. A lot of projects have been proposed and not completed. This is a significant challenge. If production is going to continue to grow in Western Canada, we got to find some way to get it to markets, because obviously we're not consuming it in the region where it's produced. So the just having additional egress options is vital. The railway provides that opportunity. This may be the slide that is the most significant. This is in the deck I've got here. This is actual data for a field which is about 75 miles from the Lashburn terminal, the Altex Lashburn terminal. So I've got access to the prices that buyers will pay for that oil, and when the producer typically, as it does in pipelines, just sells to a buyer at the pipe terminal or sells to a buyer at the rail terminal. But if you look at what buyers at rail terminals are prepared to pay versus what buyers at pipe terminals are prepared to pay, it can, as you can see on the graph here, and it's not a steady. Sometimes you can make a buck or two more if you sell to a buyer at a pipe terminal, but the reality is sometimes you can make 13 bucks more if you sell to a buyer at a rail terminal. So if you average those numbers and you're looking for the highest price you can get for the oil you produce, you're probably, if you're not selling to somebody at a rail terminal, you certainly should find out what you could get if you sold to somebody at a rail terminal, because 1, 2, 3, 4 bucks a barrel is obviously very significant in a world where we're all trying to become more profitable, stay profitable, become more profitable, survive through these challenging times. So every dime matters, let alone every dollar, and there's dollars on the table here. So this is a significant issue that I think everybody should be giving serious consideration to. So as to where it could go, and this uses data from the BP Statistical Review, which gathers production and consumption data on an ongoing basis and publishes their data every year. But if you look around the world, and showing here the blue column to the left, and it's done by regions here, but the blue column to the left is the amount of production in millions of barrels a day in the region, and the red bar to the right is the amount of consumption in each one of the regions. So focusing first on North America, given that we're all in North America, or most of us are, you can see we're actually quite balanced today in North America. That wasn't always the case. And certainly these numbers have changed quite significantly even over the last few years. But right now, Canada or North America is pretty balanced, 24.5, 24.6, 24.7 million barrels a day of production, and the same amount of consumption. South America is pretty balanced. The former Soviet Union, Russia, and former republics are bigger producers than they are consumers. The Middle East is a bigger producer than it is a consumer. And the area that is the biggest consumer relative to its amount of production is East Asia. So production there, 8 million barrels a day, not insignificant, of course, but consumption in the region is 37 million barrels a day. So maybe not surprisingly, that probably is the market that we, as a exporting nation for oil, as I'll show Canada, as I'll show in the next slide, that seems to be the logical place to be selling our product, or more of our product, is to the people that are most interested in buying it. And consumption in those regions is vastly more significant than production in the region. So countries like Japan, Korea, big consumers of oil, nominal or non-existent producers of oil, they're looking for oil. Although this is an irregular map, because ordinarily every map you would see in North America would have the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the map instead of the Pacific Ocean. I learned long ago, and I still believe it to be true, that the world is round, and the west coast of North America is actually quite close to the east coast of Asia, and that is the highest priced market for oil. Can we not find a way to get more oil from Western Canada, which is a lot closer to the western side of North America than it is the eastern side? Can we not find a way to get oil from Western Canada to Asia, and in so doing get a better price for oil? Drilling down a bit more, you can see this is just taking data from the same source but breaking it up into North America. The U.S. is still not insignificant, was vastly more an importer of oil a number of years ago, but U.S. production has grown quite significantly, while the demand hasn't. Canadian demand has also been fairly flat for decades now, but production has grown. So Canada is an exporter, has been an exporter for many years, and this actually, to some extent, is a lowball, or is a lower type representation of the amount of exports that we have, because Eastern Canada, the refineries in Halifax and Newfoundland in Quebec, are actually large importers of U.S. oil to run in those refineries. Well, Western Canada is even, if you just did this on Western Canada versus Canada overall, Canada would even be exporting more oil than is actually shown kind of here. But Canada is a significant exporter of oil, and almost all of that oil, rightly or wrongly, goes to the U.S. Now, that's our neighbor. No doubt will always be the biggest market for Canadian oil, but certainly isn't the highest price market for Canadian oil. How do we get there? It actually isn't that far away between the western part of North America and the eastern part of Asia. The red and blue lines show trading here that goes on. How does Asia get its oil? A lot of it from the Middle East. Increasingly now it's coming from Russia. Not so much Canada, but the U.S. is increasingly exporting to Asia as well. The North American numbers have switched a lot, but the one steady in this is that Canada, because it doesn't have a lot of infrastructure flexibility, has been a steady exporter of oil to the U.S. But today, Europe, who used to import oil, Russia, who used to import oil into the U.S., is now actually taking oil out of the U.S. So these numbers have changed quite significantly over the last few years. I think the takeaway from looking at this is, can we not also get to those higher price markets, and in so doing improve the price for Western Canadian producers? And doing that would mean getting more oil to Asia. And finally, before I conclude here, this talks about rail safety. There's been, all too often, I think, in this industry, we end up fighting with ourselves. So the only point I want to make here is railways are safe. They move a lot of different products. Oil is one of them. Certainly, if you're moving the type of oil that we produce in Western Canada, heavy oil, that oil is actually a lot more like asphalt than it is like gasoline. You can't, if you take heavy oil or bitumen, you can't catch it on fire with a blowtorch. It's a very safe product to move on railways. If you put the condensate in it, obviously, it is much more flammable with the condensate in it. And so the other advantage of the model that we're talking about here is to find ways to move oil without putting the condensate in. Not only is it more economic, is it more environmentally friendly. You don't have to pump the condensate to Canada and then pump it back again. it's also safer because the heavy oil that we actually produce in Western Canada is non-flammable not completely, but it has a degree of flammability akin to what the road has, not akin to what gasoline might be or some of the other products that obviously are much more flammable. So the system is safe. It's been proven to be safe, and it's been proven to be environmentally friendly and provides a very safe way to move the product, in addition to a more economic way. This particular slide actually shows the flammability of the type of heavy oil or bitumen that typically Altex handles. So obviously there are in hydrocarbon, there are, and it, the to the right. So if you start at the top of the list, I mean, propane is very flammable, butane, gasoline, you can see the different hydrocarbon products. But as you get down to the bottom, if it's asphalt. If you want to light asphalt on fire, it's going to take quite a bit of effort to start the road on fire. So I think the degree of flammability associated with that product is actually extremely low, obviously. So with that, Eliza, I'm going to conclude at least the prepared part of this, and happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, John. That was very interesting. Yeah, and we do have some questions. Are there any port capacity available in BC to take heavy oil from Alberta and move it onto Asia on ships?
There certainly is port capacity. In fact, Altex has helped our customers export oil through U.S. Gulf Coast terminals a number of years ago, even when you couldn't export American oil out of the U.S. at the time. With regulation, you could export Canadian oil. So we did move Canadian oil down for customers down to the U.S. Gulf Coast. They loaded it on ships and exported it. We've also helped customers move oil from Western Canada to West Coast ports in the U.S. That's been loaded on ships and moved to Asia. And we have helped customers move oil through ports in Canada as well. Now, one of the restrictions, and you do run into regulatory restrictions, but in fact, exporting oil out of most ports in Canada on the West Coast is actually something that C-48 doesn't allow you to do. And so, when we helped a customer move the oil to the U.S. port, it was because it was allowed to be exported out of the U.S., but was not allowed to be exported out of ports in Canada. So there is, obviously there are, in the Lower Mainland and in Prince Rupert, there are ports. They do export hydrocarbons, propane, butane, LNG is being worked on. Gasoline, diesel, all of those products can be exported, but you need regulatory approval to move it in a bigger way, and that that can be done. Now, it is being done as well through Westridge Terminal, so there is ability in the Lower Mainland to do it. And it is being done on the Lower Mainland as well. So there is capacity. It needs work. Like most things, people aren't teed up to do it unless somebody wants to do it. But if somebody wants to do it, not only has it been done, it can be done in a bigger way on a go-forward basis.
So the next question is, how did the cancellation of government contracts for oil by rail in Alberta affect the industry?
So if you look at industry data, there has been, a dramatic reduction in the amount of oil that's moving on rail cars out of Western Canada. At the start of 2020, it was about 400,000 barrels a day. By a couple of months ago, in the last reported data, it was about 40,000. It was 400,000 barrels a day at the start of 2020, and it got down to about 40,000 barrels a day. So there was a dramatic reduction. There are a number of participants at any given time. We'll have 5 or 6 different customers. Certainly, when the government of Alberta stepped up, recognized that there was a huge oversupply problem in Western Canada and put on place contracts to move oil out of Western Canada. That was an important statement that the government made. Certainly helped in the fourth quarter of 2018 to improve the realized price for producers in Western Canada. As we go forward here, even over, quite frankly, over the next couple of months, if you look at data, the amount of production that's moving on railcar is going to be increasing. And it's increasing because refiners want access to those cheap barrels. So it's our refiners that are typically our customers. They see that the barrels in Western Canada are very cheap. And they'll come and buy those barrels and then move those barrels to markets. And they're not doing it as an act of benevolence, of course. They're trying to make and are making money doing it. But it's an opportunity for producers to get access to better markets and higher prices.
We have another question came in. So this one looks like a two-parter. At what price does moving oil via pipeline with diluent become more efficient than rail? And does anything get moved in the empty tanks when returning to the oil markets?
With respect to the first question, what is the price? It has a number of different factors. So although people, and when we talk about it too, I talk about it, I talk about the WTI WCS differential as an important indicator. But as I was sort of going through the presentation, it really it's a Brent WCS, and to that, at least for Altex, which moves the vast majority of the undiluted oil, you also have a condensate differential. But as an example, the total industry volume, the other sort of three main terminals that move a lot of oil on rail as well, they saw, in the last 6 months, they've moved almost no undiluted, oil on rail in the last 6 months. Our volumes went down 20 or 30%, not a ton, but the driver is the undiluted is a much more attractive product to move on rail, much more economic product to move on rail. So the stuff that Altex and CN have been moving has gone down, but not as dramatically as the stuff that has been moving diluted. As what I think people should take from that is the type of differentials that we're seeing today. WTI, WCS about $11. Condensate worth worth a few bucks a barrel more than light oil is. Brent WTI about $2 is quite economic, and that's why you're going to see volumes increasing. So the big driver here, certainly, and the differentiating driver between the diluted and undiluted movements is the price of condensate, but you're going to see the undiluted movements also increasing. Question about returning, what comes back? The rail system has typically has a system of pricing where rail cars are returned empty. So in most cases, although it's not intuitively obvious that this is the way it should happen, we have helped customers, I guess, load oil on rail cars in Western Canada, move that product to, say, the U.S. Gulf Coast region, and the rail car will come back empty in almost all circumstances. At the same time we were doing that, and we're not doing this right now, but at the same time we were doing that a couple of years ago, we were actually helping customers who were loading rail cars with condensate in the U.S. Gulf Coast. They were railing it to Canada, and we were helping them unload it. And they were returning back to the U.S. Gulf Coast empty. There is an optimization here, and in fact, the Canadian and U.S. patent on this is owned by Altex and has been for a number of years, that it would be intuitively more sensible if oil went one direction and condensate came back the other direction. We actually do own, as I said, the patent on that, but it has, although we have done it, we haven't ever done it in any great quantity. It is just for most of our customers, it's made more sense to move product one way and then the container heads back empty, whichever direction it's going.
So, this last question, since rail transport shares capacity with other commodities, do you see future challenges with having enough capacity for high oil production from Western Canada?
Certainly there are many commodities on the rail system. The rail system is very large, obviously, and companies like Canadian National are very large entities. I think the fourth largest publicly traded company in Canada is Canadian National. So it has a huge enterprise value. And Canadian Pacific would be, the 10th or 12th largest publicly traded company in Canada. So they're very large entities, $100 billion type plus or minus entities. And the system is vast, but there are many commodities on the railway. Over the last number of years, and it depends on how much of all the different commodities are moving, how much grain's moving, how many cars are moving, forestry products, coal products. And so this is everybody is competing for space. The railway also has an ability, and the railways and CN has expanded its workforce. It's expanded it's building locomotives over the last few years, which haven't been done over a number of years. So you don't necessarily have to lay more track, but you might need more people, more locomotives, and in order to improve the capacity of the system. It's an important question, just how much product wants to move on the railway. But I think, just to, you look out your window in Calgary at the railway that's moving through town here. It's not like the railways are chalk or barker one after the other, like you might see in Europe or in other parts of the world. I think the rail itself has capacity, but to move more product. I should also note that oil is about 2% of 2% of what moves on rail. It'd be less than that now, out of Western Canada. So, or out of in Canada, about 2% of all the rail cars are moving oil. So even if you double that, it doesn't actually make a huge difference in the amount of stuff moving on rail, because it's just such a small amount of what moves on rail today. So, important question for everyone. And the data is, for other people that want to use the rail system as well. But the amount that actually of oil moving on the system, is trivial. It's not trivial to Altex. It's what we do most of the time. What we're concentrating on. But the amount of oil moving on the rail system overall is not a big number. So it's not like it's kicking anything else off the line.
We still have a few more minutes, and another question came in. So, this one's a technology question. You mentioned that you created your own proprietary system to manage facility logistics. Curious why the decision to do this versus choosing a commercial system out of the box.
So, early on, when Altex was being set up and starting with Canadian National, this idea of introducing crude oil transportation for on the rail system, it was important to Altex that we look at technology. This is a new and creative way of solving a problem for Western Canadian producers and consumers of Western Canadian oil, or potential consumers. And so the company did actually patent rail cars, and we do own the patent on kind of the modern rail car. So we own a Canadian patent on that. We own the Canadian-US patent on the four-hull backhaul, so using the rail car to move oil in one direction and condensate in the other direction. We own the patent on that, and we own the patent on moving oil by truck, into a terminal, moving that oil from truck that heavy oil from truck into tanks, and from tanks into rail cars. So those are all patents that Altex holds. And the other technology thing that we did early on, or one of the other technology things, is we created our own logistics system. And so the logistics system was created not only to manage flows within our terminal. We are we do the for producers, because often the oil is coming out of a tank and coming out of the producer's tank on the well site, and it comes into our tanks at our terminals. So we are custody transfer. So we have to meet Alberta and Saskatchewan, where we get oil, where our producers are producing their oil. We have to, we're doing the custody transfer for government purposes. So we needed to have good control of, the oil that's coming in by truck, management of that oil in the tanks, and then the movement of that oil from the tanks into the rail cars. So that's all part of our logistics system, our SCADA system. And then in conjunction with that is an ability to help our customers, either the refiners who are getting the oil because they need it to run through their refineries, or the producers who want to know when they're going to get paid. It's a way of making sure that we can track, where the oil is on the system, so when it gets to destination, the producer knows that they're going to get paid. And I should also note that the rail will get you the oil to market a lot faster than the pipeline system will. If you put a barrel of oil in a pipeline, it's going to take 30 days to get to Chicago, or 45 days to get to the Gulf Coast. When you put it in a rail car, it'll get to the refinery and get to Chicago in 4 days and get to the Gulf Coast in 8 days. So potentially for the producer, that's an ability to accelerate payment quite significantly, because it's going to be run through and already gone through a gasoline engine in New York before it would even get there on pipeline. So the why we did it is we did it to make sure, as part of our customer service offering, we could meet all of the regulatory requirements for custody transfer, that producers could feel confident that they were getting paid for every oil they produced, so that refiners could get confident that they were paying, who they should be paying for the oil, and so we can track the oil to destination to give producers comfort that and refiners comfort that the oil will be there when they need it to be there, and will be there as fast as possible. So it was a not insignificant investment, to be honest, in internally generated IT, especially for a small company like Altex. But it was something that didn't exist at the time as the business was being introduced, and so we took an IT platform and brought it to help solve a problem, I guess, that wasn't being done at the time.
All right, it looks like we have answered all of the questions. So once again, John, thank you so much for your time today. It was very interesting. Thank you very much for joining us today, folks, and we hope to see you at the next event.
Thanks, Eliza.
Thanks. Bye.